Cheney held only scorn for tell-all books, yet he is in the midst of writing one. He was once a power center in his own right, but has recently complained about how and when that all changed. In our fourth story in the countdown, Dick Cheney's disappointment with George W. Bush and Bush's break with him has fueled Cheney's willingness to write about it. All about it. New details from one of the informal gatherings the former vice president has been holding to discuss his upcoming memoir, according to the Washington Post's Barton Gellman, who will join us in a moment. Quoting Mr. Gellman's report, in the second term, he felt Bush was moving away from him, said a participant in the recent gathering. He said Bush was shackled by the public reaction and the criticism he took. Bush was more malleable to that. The implication was that Bush had gone soft on him, or rather, Bush had hardened against Cheney's advice. It was clear that Cheney's doctrine was cast iron strength at all times, never apologize, never explain, and Bush moved toward the conciliatory. Cheney had not, and now his disdain for what he perceives to be weakness in the Obama administration's approach to national security may soon be directed at Bush. Quoting again from the article, Cheney himself has said without explanation that the statute of limitations has expired on many of his secrets. When the president made decisions that I didn't agree with, I still supported him and didn't go out and undercut him. Cheney said, according to Stephen Hayes, his authorized biographer, now we're talking about after we've left office. I have strong feelings about what happened. Let's bring in, as promised, Washington Post national reporter and author of Angler, the Cheney Vice Presidency, out in paperback later this month, Barton Gellman. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you.
Cheney's influence dimmed. He grew bitter. That would be a simple reading of this. Is there far more to it than that?
Yeah, sure, there's more to it, because Cheney's not so much about keeping score or taking credit. He's a guy who cares about outcomes. Let's assume an alternate universe in which Dick Cheney appeared on your show. He would say to you, don't you acknowledge that there is a possibility that terrorists will acquire nuclear weapons and will have no hesitation in using them? And once you concede that, he says, what wouldn't you take the gloves off for if it wasn't for that? Where would you not say, use harsh interrogation measures on terrorists, or use domestic surveillance, or look for a way to topple the regimes in Iran and North Korea? And he thought he had George Bush convinced of this, and Bush walked away from it in the second term. It gets more personal than that, however, because Cheney is saying Bush did so for the wrong reasons. When he describes Bush as caring too much about public opinion, that's a cardinal sin in Cheney world. People who seek after popularity, who change their mind in response to polls, who don't show resolve, those are people who are morally lacking at some point, because Dick Cheney's an anti-politician. He's a guy who thinks that unpopularity in the service of the right policy is a badge of honor.
Yeah, are there any indications, did you get any indications at this point what specifically he thinks Bush did or did not do, or is it still in those generalized sort of being responsive to the American public?
Look, Dick Cheney is not a guy who spills his guts even in small group private meetings. It's surprising and unusual that he said as much as he did. The question was about what regrets Cheney had, and his regret was that Bush had walked away. The subjects we know that he was unhappy with were, there was no more waterboarding, no more secret prisons. There were there was a decision to go to Congress for permission to do domestic surveillance, which Cheney didn't think a president needed. There was a decision to engage diplomatically with Iran and North Korea, and in fact to give them small carrots that Cheney didn't think they deserved, when the whole game for Cheney was keeping unrelenting pressure on those governments in hopes that they would fall.
The statute of limitations has expired on many of Cheney's secrets. From that, do you infer that this book would be filled with detail, the kind of which we would not expect from Cheney?
Well, I sure hope so. I'd buy that book.
Yeah. All right, agreed on that.
I mean, I'm all for openness. Look, he means it metaphorically, I think, in context that, you know, the game is played, the decisions are done, and it's okay to talk about it now. Now, this is a departure from his old view that memoirs were inherently self-serving and damaging to the process of government, because a president had to believe, and his advisors had to believe, in order to foster a candid debate, that what happened in the Oval Office stayed in the Oval Office. And Dick Cheney is now going to talk about that. How far he goes, I don't know. What I do know is that he is being fairly open in his private talks now about his disagreements and his willingness to describe them.
Any sense of any contradiction within the former vice president about it being over enough to have memoirs written, but not be over enough for him to have shifted from any of his positions? Because presumably you would not want to write about any of these things that you still thought were so vitally important and were not being done, unless they had somehow lessened, unless that threat had somehow become less immediate, don't you think?
Well, I don't look, I'm not on the inside of his head. I don't know exactly how he would see that. He cares about affecting the debate. He cares about shifting policy. He's not moving into this sort of statesman-like, above the fray, self-reflective kind of way that many politicians do in memoirs. He wants to convince us here and now that he was right and his legacy needs to carry on.
Barton Gellman of the Washington Post, an extraordinary story and something to look forward to for historians in the making. Great, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.